Hi, today I'd like to talk about a couple different ways that we can represent fractions. Fractions are a part of a whole. There are multiple models and ways that we can share fractions. Let's take a look at this first. In this model, I have a bar, and when I want to share a fraction, fractions have to be divided into equal parts. Fortunately, this app will break this into perfectly equal parts for me. So I'm going to start out with just 4 parts. So I've now divided my bar into 4 equal parts. When talking about a fraction, we're talking about a part of this whole bar. So in this case, right now I have nothing colored in. I have 0 of the 4 parts shaded in. I'm going to use yellow here. I'm going to color in 1, 2, 3 of the 4 parts. If I wanted to share this as a number, written as a number, a special way that we write a fraction is a number over top of another number. We do this because the top part of the number shows how many of the parts we're talking about. Right now in this bar, we have 3 parts that are shaded in. That's my numerator that goes on the top. How many parts are there total? How many? 3 out of how many parts? So I use a line and I write 4 as my denominator. So when I read this number, I read it as 3/4, and I know that it means I have 3 out of 4 parts. Let's look at another one. We can divide the same size whole into more pieces. So in this case, let's use 8 parts, divided into 8 equal pieces. And in this case, we'll use green. I'm going to fill in 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. So how would I write this? Remember how we wrote our last one? We had 4 parts shaded in out of how many? 4 out of 8. So one way we can represent fractions is with a picture, with a shape divided equally, and we can shade in a certain number of parts. We write how many parts are shaded or how many pieces we're talking about on the top out of how many total on the bottom. Numerator, denominator. Another way we regularly show fractions is with a number line. You're used to using number lines to show whole numbers like 1, 2, 3, or when we count by tens, we start at 0 and we jump 10 jumps. In this case, we're going to put fractions here, and our fraction number lines start at 0. Now we need to label the other end of our number line. In this case, each bar represents one whole bar that we have broken into pieces. So right now, if I draw a line at the very end of my bars, I could say this represents 1. Okay. So with my yellow pieces, if instead of only having 3 out of 4 filled in, if I filled in all 4 bars, I have filled in the whole bar, and the way I could write that fraction is 4/4. That would mean the same as 1 whole, and that could be written on the number line underneath the 1. What about for my green? If I fill in my green bar all the way to the end, all the way to where I fill up 1 whole, how would I write that as a fraction? Good. Did you say 8/8? Correct. We filled in 8 out of all 8 parts, and this would be all the way at the end of my number line to show 1. Let's do a couple other numbers. For my yellow, what if instead I only filled in 1 of those yellow pieces? The way I would show this on the number line would be by coming to the end of my 1 piece, drawing a line. I could mark this point on the number line as 1/4. This makes sense because if I look at this 1 piece, I drew a line right at the end of 1 piece. I could draw my line right at the end of 2 pieces, and right at the end of the 3rd piece, and finally that 1 whole at the end of the 4th piece. I could name this 1/4, I could name this 2/4, I could name this 3/4, and I've already written 4/4 as 1 whole. So if I didn't have my bars above, I could still see on the number line that if I took a jump from 0, I could jump 1 out of 4 parts, 2 out of 4 parts, 3 out of 4 parts, and 4 out of 4. We could do this with our green bar also. How would we represent this on a number line? I would come right to the end of that one piece, and I would name this 1/8. Oh, look, there happens to already be a number at the 2/8 mark. That's because we can see that this bar was a candy bar, a yellow candy bar, and I had a green candy bar. If I cut the yellow candy bar into 4 equal parts and gave you 1, or if I took that same size candy bar, a green one, but this time I cut it into 8 parts, a little bit smaller for each, I could give you 2 of those green parts, and it would be the same as giving you 1 of the yellow. So another way I could say 1/4, if I cut the pieces smaller, I could name that as 2/8. So I jump 1/8, 2/8. Here's my next line. 3/8, one more jump, 4/8. Oh, look, that also had an equivalent fraction. That's what we call it when fractions are equal. If I fill in 2 of my fourths and I fill in 4 of my eighths, 2/4, 2 out of 4 pieces of a candy bar, or 4 out of 8 pieces of a candy bar would represent the same amount. So I could continue with my eighths, marking each of those pieces. So again, if I were to jump on my number line, just like I did when I had whole numbers instead of fractions, I could jump 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8. You know what I was just noticing? That right now, when I have 2/4 filled in or 4/8 filled in, it reminds me of another fraction. I'm going to add one more, and this time I'm only going to break my candy bar into 2 parts. Did you notice this too? Another way we could say 2/4 or 4/8 would be, what would we call this fraction? That's right, 1/2. So the neat thing about fractions is our lower number, our denominator, represents the size of the pieces. The top number represents, the numerator, how many of those pieces I have. So if I have 4 pieces, a candy bar broken into 4 pieces, and I get 2 of them, or if I break them smaller into 8 pieces and I get 4, or I just snap it right in half into 2 pieces and I get 1, this would all be the same amount represented as a fraction to tell me how many of the different size pieces I have.